As we find ourselves in another election cycle in this country of the United States of America, there is, of course, an endless 24-hour news cycle where you have cult worship on both sides, whether it's the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, people following their leaders blindly, having blind faith in a political party, and completely identifying their tribe in life as a political party. Now, I don't need to add to those voices. I don't need to be another talking head who's just discussing the news and all of the stories of this candidate and all of the dirt that was gathered on that candidate. It's all self-evident. Politics are corrupt. Both parties have vested interests in power. And it's not so much a question of who the savior of this country is going to be. More than it is a question, what would be a step in the better direction and what would be a step in the worse direction? Because at this moment in our culture and our society, there are many forces at work pulling people in many different directions. And when you look at the leadership and the ruling class, you have to wonder which form of leadership will take us in a more positive direction than the other. Now, for those of us who are not happy with the modern value system, because the modern value system is pushed on us by a group of people who rule society with ideologies that they have hatched out of their own brains, that they have proclaimed by their own research that's unquestionable. But there is a far better source for morality and ethics and a vision of what is correct and incorrect. And that is the Bible. The Bible is one of the oldest books in the world. It is the foundation of civilization and a universal understanding of morality and humanity that has been given to us from on high. It is divine revelation. When this country was founded on the basis of people's freedoms that are self-evident, that are given to them from God, that was actually a good idea and a good starting point for our country. Because what do people need? People need freedom. They need freedom under God, and they need their God-given rights to be reinforced by a country and a group of people that care about reinforcing the truth and care about supporting individuals in their quest for pursuing goodness and righteousness on this earth. Now, let's talk about the limitation of government for a moment, and the fact that government is not actually the answer when it comes to looking for true leadership and real progress in life. During the times of Samuel the prophet, the nation of Israel did not have a king, but they asked him to anoint a king for them because they said that they wanted to be like the rest of the world, and they wanted to have a king that they can call their own. Now Samuel perceived that this was not actually coming from a good place. It was coming from a weakness where the people wanted to be governed by a king as opposed to being governed by God. And so Samuel cautioned them very strongly, telling them that this probably would not end up as well as they thought. This is Samuel 1, chapter 8, verses 11 through 14. And he said, Samuel said to the people, "This will be the ordinance of the king who will rule over you. Your sons he will take, and he will put them to ride in his chariots and his army, and they will run before his chariot. And he will place them as officers of thousands and officers of fifties, to plow his fields and to cut and harvest his lands, and to make all of his weaponry and all of his chariots. And your daughters he will take to become perfumers and cooks and bakers, and your fields and your vineyards and your olive groves, the best ones he will take and give to his servants. Sound familiar? Of course. That is what happens with corrupt governments. The people who rule proclaim to be such benevolent leaders who have the best interests of the people in mind. But in the meantime, they make sure to take your sons and your daughters and your land and your fields and all of your assets to support the governmental structure, as opposed to supporting the individual. So Samuel was telling the people, don't be fools to think that this king is going to be such a good idea for you. In fact, more often than not, governments are simply there to drain the people of their own families and their children and their possessions, simply to advance the agenda of the government. So when you see the Democrat Party weaponizing compassion and saying, well, look, we have so many homeless people, and we have so many poor people, and we have so many people who need education, and all of these pleas to help people in their dire straits. Therefore, give us your money, and we will distribute it as we see fit. Now, whoever falls for that is really dumb, because why in the world would you trust a faceless government to take a gigantic chunk of your assets and your earnings to then claim that they will distribute it correctly, that they will use it exactly for the purposes of goodness and the advancement of the rest of society? Don't trust them. Don't. Because the reality is that they're taking your money and they're doing with it as they see fit. Whether they'd like to pocket it in their own pockets, give it over to their cronies, keep it in the halls of power, or put it to use for terrible evil agendas which exist amongst the government. So hold on to your freedom and don't buy this lie that the Democrat Party is the party of compassion and caring for those who are less fortunate. It is simply the government wanting your money and masking it as a call for compassionate help, where they will go ahead and be big brother and take care of everyone so that we'll all be so happy. It's clearly a lie. Now take what it says in Deuteronomy when God talks about appointing a king, where this would actually be an instance of a good king, a king who can be a leader and a face for the nation. What is required of a king? This is Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 14. The Bible talks about what is needed from a king. He must not have too many horses and too many assets. He must not have too many women, and he must not have too much gold and silver. In fact, he must write himself a copy of the Torah and keep it with him all the time. As it says here in verse 19, and it shall be with him, and he shall read from it all the days of his life, so that he shall learn to fear Yahweh his God, to guard all of the words of this Torah, of this law, and all of these decrees, to do them. Verse 20, so that his heart shall not be raised above his brothers, and he shall not turn away from the commandments to the right or to the left, so that his days shall be lengthened upon his kingship, he and his sons amongst the children of Israel. So, a righteous king, a humble king, should not be gobbling up the assets of the people, should not be taking in extensive taxes and filling up his storehouses with treasures and his stables with horses and his palace with women and taking advantage of the people. Quite the opposite. He needs to be humble and well versed in God's laws, so that he shall not become arrogant and hold himself above his brethren, he needs to understand that God put him in that position, and he has to take that with humility. Even King Solomon, the great son of David, who presided over one of the most prosperous times in Israel, ultimately met his downfall because he did not follow these commandments. He had too much gold, and he had too many women, and he went and ultimately turned away from God. So we need to be very careful and be very suspicious of leadership when they do everything in their power to drain people of their own possessions and what you need, because everyone has their own family and their own children and their own land. And once that's taken away from you, you have nothing. Now, this is a very taboo subject, and I haven't heard people really bring up the issue with the Democrat Party pushing a female to be the president. Now, of course, this is lauded as some great achievement. Well, for the first time in history, we'll have a woman president. How wonderful. Now, let's just take the extension of the king metaphor here, because the president is essentially just a modern-day king. Instead of working through a bloodline, he's voted in by the populace. But ultimately, they are taking the role of a king, which is a leader, someone who leads people into battle, someone who makes decisions about the future of the country, and someone who is the leader and the judge over the people. Now, when has there ever been a woman king? Never, and for good reason. Women and men are different. Shocker. We are different. We have different roles. We have different natures. While men are supposed to be occupying masculine roles, women are supposed to be occupying feminine roles. So let's see what the Psalms have to say about the true glory of a woman. This is Psalm 45, and it's quite a beautiful poetic writing regarding the character of a daughter of a king, of a princess. So a truly royal girl and a royal woman. What is her role, and how is she supposed to conduct herself? So Psalm 45, verse 11 reads, "Hear, O daughter, and see, and incline your ear, and forget your people and your father's house." This seems like extreme language, but just remember the alternatives here. Either a woman is playing the role of a man, in which case she's carrying on her people's name and her father's house, and she's carrying her family name as a man should be doing. Or she is going to submit herself to a new man, to her husband, who's going to be her king, who is going to be transferring his name onto her. And so this is a different situation going on over here. This is a woman who's being submissive. This is a woman who is in the halls of royalty and recognizes that she's not here to carry on her father's name. She's here to take on her husband's name. And she's here for a purpose that's deeply feminine and deeply related to her role as a woman and a mother. And it continues in verse 14. All the glory of a king's daughter is within. It's internal. The glory of the princess, the glory of the royal woman is within. So all of these women, Kamala Harris included, because she's spearheading this feminist conquest, where the woman is the face of the people, and the woman is entering this masculine role of leadership. We'll see what the Psalms have to say. All the glory of a woman is within. When a woman is truly sanctified to her man, and she's truly dedicated to her role as a feminine mother and a wife, she's not interested in playing masculine roles. She's not interested in acting like a man. She's interested in being herself and realizing her own unique potential. And as the chapter concludes in verse 17, instead of your fathers will be your sons, They will be set as officers in all of the land. And so here's the goal when it comes to a woman, and it comes to the fruits that she can bear. Instead of being the continuation of her father's house, she's now going to create the continuation of humanity. She's going to create the next generation of men, the next leaders of the people. There's a great quote, "The hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world." Women are throwing away their true power to try to chase a pipe dream, to be like men. This is ridiculous. It's not helpful for anyone. Let men play their roles and let women play their roles. And then we have a healthy society, one that's in alignment, one that exists where the family unit is in harmony. And so all of this breakdown of the family unit, the masculinization of women, the feminization of men, it's disastrous. And it's not actually an achievement. It's a perversion. To have a woman president would not be a good thing for this country. And let's take an example from our beautiful and holy, righteous matriarch Sarah, the wife of Abraham. When Abraham was entertaining the three men who were angels disguised as men, he was entertaining them as guests, and they were all sitting around the table. And at one point they asked, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" As the verse reads in Genesis chapter 18, verse 9. And they said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" And he said, "Behold, she is in the tent." Sarah was in the tent. She wasn't sitting out there with the men. She wasn't sitting there in a conference of men amongst other men when she was a married woman. This is the true nature of a woman. This is the true righteousness of a woman. Embracing her femininity, submitting herself to her husband. Not in the form of slavery or degradation, God forbid, that's all nonsense. But in the form of holiness and recognition that that is the role that God wants her to play. Because that is the essence of femininity. It's loving and it's nurturing, and it's not about seeking recognition from the world. It's about the glory that's within. Now, this is truly a hot button issue. And you see people saying all sorts of things on the topic of the LGBTQ plus people, the folks who raise a rainbow flag to proclaim their pride in what can only be referred to as perverse sexual behaviors. Now, God has already spoken on the rainbow, and He's already spoken on the nature of these relationships and these sexual identities that are being promoted and celebrated. Let's have a look. Genesis chapter 9 comes in the time of Noah, after God destroyed the entire world due to corruption. God said, "I'm going to make a covenant with mankind." And it reads, Genesis chapter 9, verses 11 through 15, "And I will establish my covenant with you, and all flesh will not be cut off again from the waters of the flood, and there will not be another flood to destroy the earth. And God said, This is the sign of my covenant which I give between me and you, and between all the living souls that are with you, for the generations to come, the generations of the world. My rainbow I have placed in this cloud, and it shall be as a sign of a covenant between me and between the earth. And it will be, when I make clouds upon the earth, then you will see my rainbow in the cloud. And I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you, and between all the living souls and all the flesh. And there will not be another flood of waters to destroy all flesh." The rainbow is God's covenant, the sign of His covenant that He made with Noah and with all the generations of eternity, and with all flesh on earth, that He will no longer destroy us with the waters of the flood. The rainbow is a sign of God's tolerance. It's a sign of God's forgiveness of his understanding of our lesser natures and the fact that we are tempted to do the wrong things more often than not. And so, in a display of understanding and compassion, God makes this covenant, represented by these many colors in the sky, in the form of a bow. Now, a bow is usually an article of war, the bow and arrow. But this is just a bow of colors in the sky and the clouds. And it's a beautiful thing that God gives to us as a sign of hope. And what do people do with that? They go and utilize that for such sinful behavior? I mean, how is that not such a huge mistake? Read Deuteronomy 6:16, chapter 6, verse 16. You shall not test Yahweh your God. Don't test God. It couldn't be said simpler than that. People think that they're going to taunt God with his own rainbow, and they're going to say, well, we know that you think this is wrong, but what? Let's see what it says in the Bible regarding these things that are going on. Leviticus chapter 18, verse 22. And with a man you shall not lie, as one lays with a woman, it is an abomination. Two men sleeping together, as a man and woman are supposed to be sleeping together, is an abomination. God made humanity in a very clear fashion. Male and female, he created them. The union of the male and the female results in the continuation of our species, in the unity of the masculine and the feminine in service of God to create life on earth. The perversion of that is abominable. Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 5. There shall not be the clothing of a man upon a woman, and a man shall not dress in the clothing of a woman, for it is an abomination of God, all who do this. This is just talking about cross-dressing. What about people who are actually mutilating their bodies to appear as the opposite sex? It's hard to even describe that these are the things going on. And you can get shut up for even mentioning that it's wrong. And there's censorship and freedom of speech is being threatened, when that's literally one of the foundations of this country. It's the First Amendment. We should be able to speak these things. These words that are not even our own words. These words that are God's words, that are written in his book of old, where these things have been around for thousands of years. And God has called it out as being wrong, which means that we need to improve ourselves. And we need to stop giving in to our evil inclination and start recognizing that God demands higher standards of us. He demands that we uphold the structure of nature that he created, that men build up the courage to become men, and that women build up the courage to become women. These are our obligations. This is our birthright. This is what we're here for. And for us to squander that and scorn what God has put us in and how God has made us will only result in our own demise and the complete downfall of society. When you look at the attack on the family unit, on family values being put to shame, where people are being encouraged to kill their babies, I mean, let's talk about another horrific thing that the Democrat Party pushes. Abortion? You know that over 1 million babies are killed a year by abortion? And they're fetuses. They're not fully formed lives. But they would be fully formed lives. They're actually in the process of forming. And if you didn't terminate that pregnancy, there would be 1 million more babies in the world. So this is an anti-life agenda. And when people question, how could people do human sacrifice? How could people kill babies? We're doing it now. And it's being legalized and it's being celebrated as a great achievement of women's rights. Please. What an insane proposition that babies should be killed as they're being formed in utero. It's a tragedy. It's nothing short of a tragedy. Take even what happened at the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, where there was literally a truck outside providing free abortions and vasectomies. Okay, in other words, they were offering to kill women's fetuses and castrate men for free. Well, if you're wondering where your taxpayer dollars are going to go, you better believe that it's going to be to fund all of this evil. And it's all wrong. All of it. God tells us to choose life again and again. This life is not something that we can come along and start cutting people and killing babies and castrating men. What a disgrace. What a disgrace. And so, when it comes down to it, these are all political things that are going on. And somehow politics has become the center of the dialogue. But politics is just an illusion. It's just an endless conversation to keep people occupied. What's really important is what's going on in our personal lives, what's going on within inside of us, what's going on in our circle of our family and our friends and our community. And the whole political class is designed to push people away from focusing on their own lives and to focus on other people's lives and other people's race to the Oval Office. But at the end of the day, if your vote counts for anything, make sure to use it to support the political party that stands for at least things that are a little better than the other one. Because if the Democrat Party is pushing blatantly evil agendas, such as robbing all of your money in the claims that they're going to be so compassionate in distributing it, and celebrating sinful relationships, the breakdown of the family unit, and the killing of fetuses and the castration of men, then maybe the Republican Party is a better idea, where at least they make an attempt to discuss family values, God, and freedom, and the negative aspects of these cultural phenomenons where people are destroying gender and destroying family and terminating pregnancies. All of those things need to stop. And so if we can move in a better direction than last year, then that would be the best thing. And this guy Trump, who's running on the Republican ticket, seems to have some fight in him. The man got shot in the head, miraculously, didn't get killed, and he got up after being shot and raised his fist and said, "Fight." Because there is something to fight for. We are fighting for the continuity of our children, of our families, of our faith, of the earth, because we're on the brink of destruction when we remove God and His morals from the picture. So the more that we can be grounded in God-based morality, and the more that we can be close to our Creator and His vision for the world, that's the right direction to move in. So let's pick up the mantle, each and every individual in their own life, and let that transfer into leadership, into fair governance for all, into true faithful leadership that's not the result of corrupted self-interest.